Hey everyone, and welcome back to Just Drones. In today's video, we're going to be looking at a few more sample problems that have actually been pulled from actual Part 107 exams. So who knows, you might see these exact problems on your exam. So let's take a look at the very first one. It says, refer to Figure 25, Area 2. The floor of Class B airspace at Air Park Dallas, airport identifier being F69, is what? And we have three choices we can choose from. We have A, 3,000 feet mean sea level, B, 3,100 feet mean sea level, or C, at the surface. So let's pull up Figure 25, Area 2, and take a look at Air Park Dallas and see where the floor of Class B airspace begins at. All right, so now that we have Figure 25 pulled up, let's zoom in a little bit more to Area 2 and find Air Park Dallas. Pretty easy find. It's right next to Area 2. It's referring to this magenta colored airport. And how do we know that? Because the information is right here. Magenta goes with magenta. So that tells us right off the bat that it's a non-towered airport, right? But that doesn't matter because it's not asking for that. So we have the actual information about the airport, so we just want to make sure that this is the airport that we need to look at. So we've got Air Park Dallas, airport identifier being F69. And then as you can tell in this figure, we're dealing with some Class B airspace. And how do I know it's Class B? Because of the solid blue line. So the Class B airspace that is surrounding the airport's name is Dallas-Fort Worth International, and you have a lot of different segments of this Class B. Remember, picture Class B as an upside-down wedding cake. If you can picture it that way, it makes it a lot easier, because in the center, Class B starts at, of course, the surface, that's what SFC stands for, and goes up to what? Not 110 feet, but 11,000 feet. Don't forget to add those two zeros when you look at sectional charts. So the inner circle, or the inner ring, surface to 11,000 feet. And as you keep going out, the floor of the Class B is going to be a little bit higher. It's not going to start at the surface anymore. So for example, right here, we have Class B starting at 3,000 feet and going up to 11,000 feet. Those top numbers for Class B airspace that you see, they're not going to change. But the floor of Class B is going to continue to go up as you go further out from the airport itself, which makes sense. If you have commercial airliners coming into Dallas International, as they are descending, the floor of that airspace is going to have to keep getting lower and lower until they get into the inner ring and Class B starts at the surface. So looking back out here, we have Air Park, and we can kind of see that it's also inside another airspace. This blue dashed line is for the Dallas Love Field Airport. That's what this blue dashed line means. Blue dashed line, we're going to talk about that pretty soon of what it represents. I'm sure you can already kind of guess, but you're actually going to see this in one of our next sample problems. But it's not worried about this airspace, right? The question was not asking for this airspace. It was asking for us to find the floor of Class B airspace around Air Park. And the way we do that, we find the airport, and we look at what segment of the Class B airspace that the airport is actually in. And once we find the segment, which looks like all around here, here's where the segment breaks off and then moves to a different altitude. Now we have to find the altitude for that segment, and we can easily find it right here. It's also way over here because this segment goes pretty far out to the northwest side of the airport. But we'll just use this altitude over here. It's the same one. So the floor of Class B would start at 3,000 feet and go up to 11,000 feet, mean sea level. and that's where Airpark Dallas sits. It sits underneath that floor of the Class B airspace. So it's actually not even in the Class B airspace. Now, if you had a pilot taking off from Airpark, well, of course, they're going to have to first talk to Dallas Love because they're inside of their airspace. And let's say they depart and they climb up to 3,500 feet. Well, now they're in the Class B airspace. And before they even could enter into that Class B airspace, they would have to get authorization from the actual Dallas Fort Worth International Airport. They'd have to get authorization from ATC to enter into their Class B airspace. So the floor of Class B starts at 3,000 feet. Another good thing to look at here is where this class of airspace ends at. It shows a minus sign. If you have never seen this before, what that minus sign actually means is pretty simple. It means that this particular airspace, again, I'm not going to say what airspace it is because we're going to see this in another sample problem. This airspace ends before the Class B airspace begins. So you can't have two different types of airspaces going in to each other. That's just not how airspace works. You actually have to have one airspace end for another airspace to begin. So this minus sign means that this airspace goes up to 2,999 feet. So it doesn't include that 3,000 foot number. And the reason why it doesn't is because that's where Class B begins at. So at Airpark Dallas, you're in this airspace until you get up to 3,000 feet, and then you're at the floor of the Class B airspace. So let's go back and look at the choices that we had. All right, so again, our three choices: 3,000 feet mean sea level, 3,100 feet mean sea level, and then of course C at the surface. So the correct answer would be what? A, 3,000 feet, right? Because that's where the floor of that Class B airspace began at. So it's really just a scavenger hunt. You're just looking for that particular airspace, and then you're looking at where the airspace actually starts and ends at. And especially in this particular case, in this particular question, we're looking at where the airspace begins at for that Class B airspace. All right, let's take a look at another sample problem. All right, in this sample problem, it says, with certain exceptions, Class E airspace extends upward from either 700 feet or 1,200 feet above ground level to, but does not include blank. The three choices we have is A, 10,000 feet mean sea level, B, 18,000 feet mean sea level, or C, 14,500 feet mean sea level. To figure out this problem, I always like to use this chart to kind of explain where airspaces start at and where they end at. So the best way to picture Class E airspace is, yes, it is a controlled airspace, but picture it as everywhere else. That's what the letter E stands for, everywhere else. So any place that you don't have another type of controlled airspace at, or uncontrolled airspace like Class G, which normally starts at the surface, that's where Class E is going to be at. So it's almost like Class E is there to fill up the empty space. And typically you have Class E that will start at either 700 feet above ground level, 1,200 feet above ground level. You can also have Class E that starts at surface at some airports. If you see some of my other airspace videos, you'll see examples of that on SkyVector. But we need to know where Class E usually ends at. And Class E actually ends where Class A begins. So if you see here, you have Class E basically everywhere else that other classes of airspace are not. And it goes up to, but does not include, 18,000 feet mean sea level. So Class E actually ends at 17,999 feet above sea level. So it might start at 700 feet above ground level, might start at 1,200 feet above ground level, but it will always end at 17,999 feet above sea level. Don't get those two mixed up. It will start at above ground level number, but it's going to end at a above sea level number, or an MSL number. And the reason why it has to end at 17,999 feet is because Class A is going to start at 18,000 feet mean sea level. So the other way they say this with the FAA is they say up to but not including 18,000 feet mean sea level. And then Class A will actually go all the way up to, but does not include, flight level 600. And that's just another way of basically saying 60,000 feet. Once you get up to 60,000 feet, or flight level 600, Class E starts again and goes pretty much all the way out to outer space. So let's look back at the problem and find our answer. So of course the answer here would be 18,000 feet mean sea level, because the question even says but does not include. So it will start at 700 feet or 1,200 feet above ground level, all the way up to but does not include 18,000 feet mean sea level. Now keep this in mind, on the Part 107 exam you might see another answer that you can choose from that has an AGL number. Don't choose that one. If it shows 18,000 feet above ground level, just know that is not the right answer, because with Class E airspace, when it goes up to this altitude that it ends at, it's going to be a mean sea level number. So don't get those two confused. All right, let's look at another sample question. All right, in this sample problem, it says a blue segmented circle on a sectional chart depicts which class of airspace? We have A, Class C, B, Class B, or C, Class D. So to show an example of this, I have an actual screenshot from SkyVector of a airspace or an airport that has a blue segmented circle around it. The airport that we're actually looking at is Northwest Florida Beaches International Airport in Panama City, Florida. The airport identifier for it is ECP, or Echo Charlie Papa. Control tower 118.95 when it's in operation. After it shuts down, it turns into the CTAF frequency. ATIS is 119.975. It has a field elevation of 69 feet above sea level, has pilot controlled lighting or lighting limitations exist, and has a 10,000 foot long runway, which is the longest runway. So knowing the color of the airport, it's blue, right? So knowing what blue means, that means that it is a towered airport. So what does the blue segmented circle represent? What kind of airspace? It's Class D, also known as Class Delta airspace if you're using the phonetic alphabet. So Class Delta airspace surrounds Northwest Florida Beaches International. And by the way, Class D is probably one of the simplest types of controlled airspace surrounding actual towered airports. It's always going to be just one circle. That's it. One blue dashed circle. And we can tell from here with this number that Class D starts at the surface and goes up to 2,500 feet above sea level, or an MSL number. So this is an example of a Class D airport. So just remember, blue segmented circle is Class D. And the easiest way to remember that is D stands for dash, blue dashed circle. And then Class B is blue solid circle. So if it's a blue solid circle and has many different segments of it, or many different layers, then of course it's going to be a Class B. If it's just one layer and it's dashed, it's going to be a Class D. And Class D versus Class B is a huge difference. Class D is really not that busy. It's just busy enough to actually have controlled airspace around it. And then Class B, the big boy, being the busiest type of airspace, busiest kind of airport that you can deal with in aviation. So going back to the problem, the correct answer is going to be C, Class D. Class D airspace. That's what a blue segmented circle on a sectional chart depicts when you're dealing with this class of airspace. So that does it for today, everyone. Please, if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to go on YouTube, find my channel at Just Drones, and make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. I have tons of videos that help explain better airspace and Part 107 knowledge, and I'll continue to post those videos every single week. Have a good one, everybody.